have a category of then those who cannot access and cannot afford. So we'll be looking at these last two categories of those who could potentially afford but cannot access, and those who cannot afford and cannot access. And that's the basis on which we understood, we undertook two studies to understand the drivers better. So the first study, we called it Understanding the Impact of Distribution Costs on Uptake of Off-Grid Solar Products in Select Sub-Saharan African countries. These countries that we looked at were Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, and Malawi. We also undertook, and this particular study addresses those who are electrified but can afford but perhaps cannot access the products. The second one we looked at is a study on how to access consumer finance for vulnerable groups, and whether one size fits all to address consumer finance concerns. Obviously, we were, the pay-as-you-go model has been extremely successful in some countries, but not in all countries in providing affordability. And so these studies will be providing us with some insights on what can be done in different jurisdictions, in different countries, or we can look at alternative ways of financing financing consumers. Now, we also looked at and asked ourselves the question of whether distribution costs impact on pricing. And we also looked at whether landlocked countries are disadvantaged over coastal countries. To get an appreciation of this, and going back, if we can just go back one slide, back to the A-Staff overview, we looked at the landlocked countries, and in this case, to get an appreciation, you have, for example, for a product to reach Rwanda, it would have to either go through Kenya or through Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, for it to reach Rwanda by road. For a product to reach Zambia or Malawi, it would have to go through Tanzania, or it would have to go through South Africa. And the same as Zimbabwe, which would have to go through South Africa. So the question we're asking ourselves is, what can be done to lower costs and make product more affordable, regardless of whether a country is landlocked or a country is a coastal town, is a coastal country. So going forward to slide 6, Victor, if you can go forward to slide 6. Yep, thank you. So we looked at distribution and how that impacts, coming from the basis that, these products have to come a long way from whichever port of entry they're coming from into different countries. And we looked at, we had several assumptions, and because the question was about affordability, we asked ourselves whether the distribution costs had a significant impact on the pricing of the products themselves. We also asked ourselves whether there were distribution barriers that impact the ability to deliver the necessary volumes of these products directly to final customers. So those two assumptions really, again, speak to the core of what we will be discussing today. So one, on costs, impacts on, the cost will impact on affordability. The distribution barriers impact accessibility. So as we're looking at the barriers as well, we went, the report goes into much more detail on the, what are the other barriers that companies are experiencing in terms of distribution, whether it's in a landlocked country or whether it is in a coastal country. And the barriers were quite similar across board, and they include heavy working capital, the need to import large volumes to get economies of scale, inconsistent tax application, and enforcement of quality standards. So we will not delve a lot in these barriers because they're quite cross-cutting, but we will look at some of the recommendations that can help us to overcome these barriers. As you can see from the graph, and there'll be much more information coming. When you look at the final retail costs, you have 37% manufacturing costs, which may or may not be, could be made better to bring the cost down. And then you have about 47% in distribution costs. This is right from the manufacturer all the way up to the consumer. And here is where we'll spend quite a bit of time in understanding what else can be done to bring down this the cost of distribution. And then there are others, other overheads and margins that also contribute to the cost of the price. So this helps us flow into the next conversation when we're looking broadly at affordability, and some of these recommendations have been provided to address the issue of affordability, starting from having strategic partnerships, companies having strategic partnerships, perhaps the use of specialized intermediaries that will the cost, increase the volume and economies of scale, integrating technology into operations to be more efficient, decentralizing supply and distribution, and alternative consumer financing that also speaks to affordability. So going to the next slide. So to bring together the two conversations, where you have the conversation on how does the product get to the end consumer, and how can we make it more affordable at the consumer level. We find that there are some costs that might be directly contributed to distribution, and there are others, and these are more on the company side, that there's more efficiency that can be put in on the company side to bring the cost down. But then there's also the consumer side and helping the consumer access these products. So we looked at several models. One is the PEGO model, which is has quite a strong presence in East Africa, particularly in Kenya, due to the high mobile adoption rates. It's a well-known model and has reached a lot of rural households, but has not yet penetrated to the last mile. So we still have a gap to address with the last mile and to the end consumer. We also looked at MFI models, which are more prevalent in countries that have lower mobile penetration, particularly Ethiopia and Nigeria. And these also just form part of what is it that we can promote in which countries to ensure that we're able to reach to the last mile household. We can move to the next slide. We also now will be proposing several models and ideas based on community, what we call community-based models. Some have already been considered and others maybe not so, but also recognizing that each country has a unique culture, and some of these community-based models may work well in some communities and not so well in others, but are also a real alternative to address the question of affordability for customers. So there's several other solutions, and we will go into more depth as we break out and go into the different work streams that we will be presenting at this workshop. And I will let Victor, give us a little more details on how this will be done. We also have some material that was prepared for this particular workshop that will be made available for you to look at. The reports are available, but we also have shortened versions of them in infographics that help you to get an appreciation quickly on what the areas that we're talking about and the recommendations that we're giving or putting forward in this workshop. In addition, we're also collaborating on this particular workshop with the Global Distributor Collective, who will also be highlighting a study on that is entitled Finding the Sweet Spot, Identifying Affordable Quality Products for the Last Mile. So again, just in keeping with our conversation about making quality products available and affordable to the last mile. So is so the two breakout sessions will be focusing on one on distribution costs and the other on alternative consumer financing. So I'll let Victor just give directions on how you can join the particular session that you would be more interested in. And we look forward to hearing from you and feedback on what you found most useful, what you found that you can actually implement in your various countries of operation, and we look forward to continue to be a support to the sector. So I'll end there and we'll come back and wrap up once we come from the two different sessions and take it forward from there. So thank you very much, and over to you, Victor.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, everyone. So as I mentioned earlier, we have two breakout sessions. The links to both I have just put up on the chat section of this call, of this meeting. So if you click on any of those links, depending on which one you're interested in, it will take you into that other meeting. Please note that we will need to come back to this meeting for the wrap-up session for us to be able to hear from the facilitators of both meetings. And then based on that, we will then have the closing remarks at this particular place. When you get onto those other, to the two sessions, there will be links provided for you to join a Slido from those that then will allow you to be able to actually contribute to the conversations that are happening there. If you're having any challenges with joining the links sent up, just let me know and I will be able to allow you to do the same. If you click the link, it should just open the other meetings and it should allow you into the other meetings, and this then will be on hold so that you can just come back to this particular meetings. For those who may be having any challenges, just go ahead and provide that, inform us of the same on the chat section here, and we'll be able to let you know how to be able to join those two meetings. For now, I think let us join those two meetings. I think there will be instructions on how to use Microsoft Teams and not Microsoft Teams, sorry, Slido on both sessions so that you can be able to contribute effectively to those. Thank you and see you on the two breakout sessions. If there is any challenge, please let me know and I'll be able to help you be able to join those two other sessions.
I have also just popped a link to the Slido in the chat for anyone that wants access to that as well. It will hopefully, if things go properly, there'll be a short, a very one question poll in there just to kind of gauge views, which you can have a kind of look at, as well as I will bring that up on the screen as I go through the presentation, and then hopefully we'll be able jump into a more detailed conversation. Very much want this to be more interactive than me talking all of the time. Is the plan.
So welcome back to the main session. We'll just give there's one group that is still to join us that is wrapping up.
Is everyone back? Please do let me know if there's anyone who has not, who is having difficulties being able to join us back on this session. I think both sessions were, I hope they were as good as the one I was in. So we will just take some time to hear from both sessions, starting with Jonathan on his session from the alternative consumer financing in terms of what was happening in there and some of the things that were coming out. And then we'll also hear from Emma and the other Jonathan, and then we'll proceed to wrap it up and call it a day. So Jonathan, if you're here, just give us a bit more insight in terms of what some of the that you are having on the other side, and then we'll proceed from there. Esther, you can guide if there is anything that I may have missed.
No, we are good.
All right. I guess I can go ahead and sort of share some of the insights we're getting from our end. Yeah, we broadly were walking through, the findings in terms of the impact of distribution costs and barriers on affordability and accessibility, and just looking at, the cost breakdown of the distribution costs and which components within the distribution costs are, can operators as well as other ecosystem players work towards reducing so that they can reduce the overall cost. And I think one of the interesting things that came out from the discussion was thinking about how can fiscal fees, for example, be reduced in order to reduce the overall costs to the distributors. Another area which we kind of looked into was the sales and marketing, and I think the discussion around that, I guess there were mixed feelings as to how effective that can be. What we saw in the market, for example, was that, or what we saw from the study was that some operators are leveraging partnerships, for example, with big brand names in the market. For example, Phoenix partnering with MTN, other OGS operators in Zambia, I think, were partnering with Total. But there was a question around how effective are some of these partnerships in terms of reducing costs, because one of the key elements that we know is, of course, there is a component of awareness that must be taken into account. Many of the consumers are largely not aware about solar products. So the question is beyond just making these products available to the customers through these partnerships with these big corporates. The question is, how do we make the market more aware? So broadly, in terms of the breakout session, it was discussing how can components of distribution be lowered, and I think the discussion was broadly around the sales and marketing piece, but also the fiscal fees element. I think from our the interesting discussions that we had, happy to hear from I guess Emmy on this as well.
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. Emma, did you want to say something, or shall I go ahead?
No, very happy for you to go ahead then, Amy.
Okay, I hope you can all see me. It's suddenly gotten very dark where I am, so sorry about that. So just for context, I mean, apart from looking at the kind of breakdown of distribution costs and where there might be efficiency gains there, the other part of the breakout session looked at the products themselves. How do we identify more solar products that are high quality and affordable? And that was the focus of the report that the GDC recently put out. And I think the discussions that we had after that were really around, because I mean, spoiler alert, but we did find some products that were high quality and affordable. So the discussion was about what's next. How do we get these unknown products that are, could solve distributors' affordability issues to an extent, and that they'd have more affordable products to offer their consumers? How do we get them to distributors? How do we make consumers more aware of them? And so we talked about possibly aggregating some of the smaller players, enabling them to do a bit more advocacy to push these type of products more. We talked about leveraging intermediaries, wholesalers who could leverage economies of scale to kind of almost outsource that part of the distributor's value chain and be fully responsible for identifying and importing these products. And we talked about the role of some of the other stakeholders in the ecosystem as well, what we can do around amending the standards, or again, making the standards a bit more consumer facing. What could organizations like the GDC and other associations do when it comes to matchmaking, just getting the right manufacturer and the right distributor to connect? So yeah, those I think were the main discussion points that came out of our breakout group. Emma, I'll let you add anything if I've missed something.
No, good summary. Thanks, guys. Happy to hand it over to group 2 to do a wrap up.
Jonathan C, are you available?
Absolutely. Hi everyone. Hi again. So thanks for that, and certainly looking forward to hearing a bit more from the distribution side of things, just to understand that better, and looking forward to hearing some of the more of the outcomes of the discussion you had. I think from our side, in terms of the alternative consumer finance piece, looking at the different sort of options that we were exploring, I think one that came across most clearly as being what people were interested in, it kind of got over 50% of the votes of the people in the room as being something that had the most potential to kind of scale access to consumer finance for those that don't currently have access, was around how to better leverage community savings and loan associations. I think one of the key pieces of that conversation was the sector in a lot of countries has done a great job of leveraging microfinance institutions, particularly outside of Sub-Saharan Africa. So if you look at what's happened in India, with GLP being a great example of how they've used MFIs to expand their ability to distribute products, and particularly taking the risk of the financing those off their own books, and with the MFIs providing the finance. There have been countries in Africa where that's been more successful. So Ethiopia, Nigeria, where there maybe is that lack of mobile money. But I think one of the big challenges that we sort of discussed on that was, how can the OGS companies engage with those types of groups that are more informal than the formal MFIs. So village savings and loan association groups, also known as chamas here in Kenya, or any of the other groups that exist across countries, and some of the governance and operational challenges that's involved with engaging with those groups, that potentially a lot more vulnerable communities are members of than the more formal institutions such as MFIs. And just to touch then very quickly on a couple of other pieces that were of interest, I think rental models was something that was voted for as quite an interesting topic to explore further. And those are models which, with consumers renting off-grid products on a daily basis, and then returning them to a central point for charging or to pick up a new product on the next day, giving consumers a lot of flexibility, but also removing those upfront affordability challenges, and seeing how that could be better for consumers that want more choice, or who don't have as regular incomes, or fundamentally who just have lower incomes overall. And then similar to a different model that can be used is that remittance-based model. So there was certainly some interest in what Bbox is doing to try and leverage the diaspora to make payments on behalf of users of off-grid solar products. How can that ensure more regular constant repayments. So if anyone's interested in that, if you the eBox and Shell Foundation have put out some reports on the progress and success of that study, and I know that there are other organizations that are looking at doing that potentially in refugee settings as well, where remittances are a massive inflow of money into Sub-Saharan Africa, equal in size in terms of flows of income to donor and development money. And the final thing I just want to touch on then is around a lot of questions around performance of different repayment terms. So varying the size of the deposit or the length of the repayment that consumers are able to make for their products, and really the fact that there hasn't been sector-wide consensus on which approach is best. Lower deposits or higher deposits, or shorter repayments versus longer repayment terms, both have their challenges, both have their advantages. But I think what was really important to note is needing to understand the consumer better, to be able to then test repayment mechanisms, gather evidence, and then deploy those repayment terms in the right settings to the right consumers, to both ensure that consumers are able to make repayments, but then also to ensure that companies are able to reap the financial benefits of higher repayments and more secure cash flows moving forwards. So those are a few of the pieces we touched on, and as well as sort of a summary and brief notes on some of the other recommendations in the full report. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. Esther, do you want to take it from here and lead us to the end?
Actually, we'll just invite Pauline to just do a wrap-up and some concluding remarks, just to tie up both conversations. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And thank you all. I think I managed to jump into both conversations and just hear what the questions that were being asked and the conversations that were going on in both sessions. And I think we've had a really good afternoon. One, an understanding and I believe a consensus that affordability is something that can be achieved. However, we need to work, maybe I could say work hard to find the places in which we can make those savings that can then be passed on to the consumer. I think the other thing that has come out, especially from the collaboration we've had with GDC on this workshop, is the fact that affordability does not compromise quality, and therefore there is a way in which we can achieve both affordability and affordability, access, and quality products reaching to the end consumer. These conversations will continue, and resources have been put in your hands. We encourage you to look at the reports and see how these can assist in achieving some savings that can be passed on to the consumer. Ideas that can, practical ideas that can be used even to bring down the cost of operations for companies, and with that, that added benefit being passed on to the consumer. Off-grid solar products are an important part of electrification, and the conversation around reaching universal energy access is not without doubt. We have no doubt about this, but looking at but we all need to make a concerted effort to really make this possible, and so it will take different aspects of us looking and see how we can get to that last mile, and to achieve access to the last mile. So I really do sincerely want to thank you all for being on this workshop, for the conversations, for the questions. The resources, as I have said, continue to be available. Some have been dropped in the in the chat box, and others are also available on our website. So if you go to www.ace-taf.org, you should find all these resources available. They're open source and can be used to be of benefit to the sector. So I want to thank you all and hand it back over to Victor for any last feedback, suggestions. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline, and thank you, everyone. The link to the website and the Knowledge Hub that Pauline has just referred to has just been shared on the chat section. So if you proceed to that, you'll be able to actually have a look at that and be able to get the resources that have been mentioned. I know we have tried to ensure that we stick to the time that we had agreed on. And so just to finish up, I have a request for all of us here. I don't know how many can just confirm to us. I don't want to take you to the other side to this slide or as well. I would just like to ask for those who received the resources based on the links that were shared both from the invite, just to mention how useful they were on the chat as we did in the other meeting. If you did receive any of those resources, just type yes on the chat section. If you didn't, just type no. We would want to understand whether we were able to get those to you, and so to know exactly who did not receive them so that we can actually make them available. That is both the report on the cost of distribution and the other one on alternative consumer financing. And we also shared links to the briefs that were developed from both. The summary for the cost of distribution and the infographic details on alternative consumer financing. So just type yes or no in the chat section if you received them, if you didn't, so that we can actually be able to provide them for you for reference and for future use with any further part of this conversation. I think that's it from us for today. I'd also like to echo what Pauline said in terms of thanking everyone for making the time to be with us today. If you have any specific requests for any material that was shared or any information that was shared today, just reach out to any of us, that is Esther or myself, directly, and we will be able to provide you with the same. Anyone who is interested in being able to receive both reports and the resources that I've mentioned, just drop your email in the chat section as well, and I'll be able to just share those with you directly. Otherwise, thank you very much, and have a good evening for those who are in East Africa. For those who are elsewhere, have a good night, good morning, whichever part of the world you're with us from today. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I think we are okay. Just keep your emails coming and I will be able to reach out to you. I think we will end this early. We are 9 minutes behind. We were supposed to end at 4:30. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. Have a good day.